right, today's conversation is about scale, more specifically, what most people get wrong about it. My guest started where many agents and team leaders do, building a business that worked, growing production, adding people, and pushing volume. Over time, that business scaled from around $100 million in annual sales to over $1 billion. But along the way, even with all that success, something became clear. More agents didn't solve the problem. The real constraint wasn't growth, it was structure. What we're exploring today is the moment when you realize the model you're operating in can only take you so far, and what it takes to build something that actually scales beyond you. My guest today is Christopher Waters. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you so much for having me on. What a great intro. Glad to be here.
The intro wasn't great. The story's great. $1 billion. That's a phenomenal number that most of us don't even think of getting to. I want to talk briefly. I had this meeting this morning. We were talking about solo agents to becoming bigger than that and becoming basically the band leader and putting all the pieces together in an orchestra. And that is what you did. Because when I mentioned about $1 billion, you started pulling from all different strings that different departments and things you got going on. So this is going to be good. What is it? At what point did you realize that it wasn't about the agents and you needed to put systems in place?
So my first iteration of growing a team after I had, been fairly successful as an agent, I got to like selling 30, 40, 50 homes, somewhere in there. And I was just running out of time in the day. And so, I was generating a lot of leads from the listings I had, and I was spending money on digital advertising. I was generating just a crazy number of leads from my digital advertising. And, I couldn't follow up with leads fast enough. And so I'm completely ignorant as a team leader, trainer, coach, all those things in the early days. I apologize for Joe, I'm hearing some background noise on your side.
Hey, really?
And I got a dog barking on my side. So let me move this dog and then hang on a second. Let's pause real quick. And my first iteration of growing a team, I was generating some leads. Also, this is 2010. So like digital advertising with Google and all that was really, taking off. And I got to a point where I was generating close to 1,000 leads a month. And so
wow.
In the summer of 2011, I went out and recruited 20 agents. And the subsequent year, we only sold 98 homes. And, I don't know, for some people, maybe that sounds good or bad, but these are $200,000 to $300,000 homes. They're not high price point homes.
Right.
It's not like we're making these big commission checks per closing. And out of the 98 closings we did, 80 of them came from me. And so the other 18 agents sold 18 homes.
Wow.
So I kind of threw my hands up in the air at that point, and I was so frustrated. At first I was like blaming the agents. I was like, man, all these agents suck. And then, and then I hired a sales coach. What was going on? And he said, look, Chris, they don't suck. You suck. And what he said to me is like, you don't know how to recruit and select the right people.
Right.
You don't have a training roadmap to get them to convert quickly. And not all leads are created equal. Like, Google, for example, like a lot of Google AdWords leads, not all of them, but most of them have a really low conversion rate. And you got to generate like 100 of them to close maybe one deal in a good market. In a bad market, it's like you may have to get 200 of them to close one deal. And so those were ultimately like the three things I had to figure out was like, how do I recruit and select the right people? And how do I invest in high intent leads? And so those were like literally the three, biggest ahas I kind of figured out really quickly on. And so in summer 2011, my CPA called me and said, Chris, you hardly made any money. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, I worked super hard. I sold like 40 some. Right. And he's like, well, it looks like you subsidized, a lot of expenses for your team. And so I went to that other agent on my team and I asked him, I said, hey, I want to burn this thing down, start over. And, we decided to kind of divide and conquer. I focused on listing side, he focused on buy side, and we got really narrowly focused at finding the best lead sources, putting a training plan in place to help people convert at the kitchen table really quickly or book appointments on the phone quickly, and how to find the right agents to give the leads to. And in the subsequent 2 years, we grew like crazy and not with a lot of agents. So we downgraded to only 7 agents. And in 2013, we did 325 closings.
Did you get rid of all those other 18 and then start all new, or did you select the 7 from that?
Had, out of those 18, we had like, I think 2, maybe 3 people that stayed, but most of them, we decided to sever ties. And so it was a painful experience, like figuring out again, who are the right people, what are the right leads and what's the right training plan to get them to convert really quickly. Because, I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. Let's see if we can help somebody else. And so then we, kind of gave our playbook to another guy in another market, and he grew even faster. He was an on-site sales rep, and he's quit his job with the builder and started a team and closed 110 homes with only, I think, 3 or 4 agents in year one. And then in year 2 did 250 closings and 350 closings. Like, he grew super fast.
Wow.
With very few agents, and and all very, all these teams were incredibly profitable, super, super high margins, 25, 30, 35% net income. So really those were the big takeaways and the big nuggets that really, was the catalyst to make it.
What was the big shift in the recruiting piece? What was it that was missing?
So I started reading these books on psychology and like all kinds of stuff. Right. And I remember reading something in there, like it was like the paragraph in the textbook said something along the lines of like, a trained professional on cognitive behavioral therapy can in most cases help somebody overcome these various limitations or challenges within 1 year's time, or worst case 3 to 4 years time, depending on how bad that internal struggle is they have. And so I was thinking to myself, I kind of had a freak out moment when I read that, because I was like, man, number one, I'm not a shrink, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't have a year to help people overcome their inner conflict. Like, when I generate leads and spend money on all this stuff, I need people to convert. So that was a very, frustrating thing to read. And so then I was like, man, well, like, there's got to be other companies out there that hire elite level talent. And I had somebody recommend this book to me called The Rare Find. And I read that book in 2011, 2012. And oh man, it was like just full of gold. Like, it gave me a lot of ideas on things to implement in our not the recruiting process, because like I think it's easy to recruit agents if you have a decent value proposition. The hard thing is selecting the right ones.
The right one, absolutely. And that's a huge problem in the industry, because there's an agent, there's somebody out there, they're all going to say yes if it's a nice proposition.
So anyways, the book The Rare Find, the author goes and like, studies all these various industries. Like, for example, in the nonprofit world, he went and studied Teach for America, which is ranked by Forbes as the 4th hardest organization to go get a job at. And if anybody doesn't know about Teach for America, it's a nonprofit. They put teachers in the worst school districts in the entire US. I'm talking about where kids are getting shot, killed, drugs, parents are all messed up, like bad, situations. And they made a movie about this called Dangerous Minds back in the 1990s. So they do the same thing like in military. I'm sure you guys, most people have seen like, the documentaries about Navy SEALs and all that stuff. Like, they take them through all these crazy things, these exercises, right? And so I started implementing like practical application in the selection process. It was the key to unlocking how to go about selecting the right people.
And those tests, those applications were specific to the way you ran your business?
So, I mean, it was very simple. Like, we made people do mock test outs of, like, imagine a listing presentation or buyer presentation, pricing a home. We would do test outs on contracts. And then once they got through all those test outs, what
do you mean by test out? Explain that. Sorry.
Like, we would take like one of our team members, like, for example, a transaction coordinator that, has closed hundreds of deals and knows what clients complain about. And she would be the seller, and the agent would, pitch them on, trying to get the coordinator to agree to sign a listing agreement. So like, that's an example of a test out. And then like, we would give them properties and we're like, hey, we want you to go price these properties. And then we give them contracts and we would say, present this contract to me like I'm a seller. And then the other test out is, so we talked about pricing, we talked about the listing presentation itself. Oh, the phone, we talked about tests on the phone. And then after they've gone through all those, we have one last test at the very end. By the way, all of this happens over the course of about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And we send them on 5 actual listing appointments. So like, we book the appointments for them, we send them on the appointments, and they have to be priced correctly. They don't make the team. They're deselected. So we started putting that in place, and like, everything's, started to change. And so just for context, so I've been doing this since I started my first team in 2010, which was a disaster, but then, we started figuring it out. But for the last, I'd say, 14, 15 years, my average agent, the worst performing agent on my team, sells about 60 homes a year. And the best performers will crank out 100 to 120 homes every single year. And this is an anomaly. We've been doing this for over a decade, these numbers. So the selection process was the first key nugget. The second, again, was the high intent leads. And the third was the training roadmap.
That's really impressive. One of the things that I've seen with agents, it happens all the time, is they are giving a formula like you have, and it doesn't fit everybody. When you do put people through this process, what is your graduation rate?
Yeah, it's low, as you can imagine. So we'll have a class of 10 people, and by day 90, I expect 70% of them not to make it.
Wow.
But the 30% that stick, they're going to be with me for years and years. I mean, some of them have been with me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like for a long time.
And this has been replicated by others leading it,
Yep.
following your formula and the same success. So that's impressive. What do you attribute to that?
Well, like I said, the three big things were selection, which we talked about. The second thing is the source of where you get leads. Like I think, the industry has been brainwashing us for over a decade about digital internet leads and how we should just accept the fact that it's normal to take 1 to 2 years to close a lead, which is absolutely mind-boggling and nuts, because you can only have so many leads in your pipeline to keep up with. And so, for example, on the listing side, go after high intent sellers. So the thing I recognize, and I think most people listening to this will recognize, is like high intent sellers are people going through major life events. So they're facing divorce, they're facing maybe they're facing foreclosure, they inherited the house and they've got to deal with, getting it sold or maintenance or fixing it up or whatever. So these are some of the life events that, cause people to sell, and they usually sell pretty fast. Like when they find out they're going through a divorce, they're like, man, how do I get rid of this house ASAP? If they inherited a house, they're like, oh my God, I got to deal with taxes, covering the cost of the utilities of the house. How do I get this thing sold? Somebody's facing foreclosure. They're like, oh my God, I got to get this on the market. I want to get my equity out, right? What I discovered a long time ago is all of those people have to go through a very public process. So for example, if you inherit a house, you have to file something called an application for probate. And that is a public thing. Unless you're rich and you set up a trust and you do all of these things, a lot of people go and file probate. And there's something called an application for an executor. And the application for the executor is the person that makes a decision on which realtor to hire. So we started pulling that information in. All the people going through probate, we started pulling in the executor's information, and we started building campaigns to market to them to get them to call us to sell their house. And our lead to appointment ratio is absolutely bonkers. For every 2 calls I get, I book 1 appointment. For every 2 appointments, I get 1 listing signed.
Nice.
So if I generate 100 leads, I'm going to book 50 appointments. 50 appointments on 100 leads. So we do this. So that's the same thing with foreclosure. Foreclosure is public record. Divorce. This is crazy. It's public. It's public record.
So you built all these systems to target the markets that you wanted to get into.
I mean, I can't take credit for building any of these. I hired a company that pulls in the data for me. And then we've done yellow letters, and we send them letters in the mail. Yes, I know it's old school, but for every 100 letters I send, I get between 1 and 3 listings signed. Worst case, for every 100 letters. Wow. So response rate is incredible. If I call them and cold email them, the numbers go up even further. If I do cold email or call, those conversion rates go up even more. And same with, foreclosure and divorce. Probate probably has the fastest turn time, and so does foreclosure. Those leads convert the fastest. Probate usually takes a little bit longer due to the timeline.
What would you say to somebody that is created that lead gen team or company, and they have all these agents on that hamster wheel of chasing those leads? What is it that you would say to them?
I would say, don't give the agents the leads, give the agents appointments. Face-to-face appointments. See, the thing is when you generate really high intent leads, there's not a long nurture cycle. So for example, I have 1 inside sales agent that books, on a bad month, 60 listing appointments. On a good month, 90 to 100 listing appointments. It's 1 ISA. The reason why he's able to book so many is because the quality of the leads is so high. If you go run a campaign on Google for people that type in, what's my house worth? That is such a low intent lead. The conversion rates are crazy, crazy low. And these are all the things the digital marketing companies are doing to a lot of these CRMs. Is they're generating a lot of low intent leads. And then the agent gets demoralized because they make 100 calls and nobody picks up the dang phone. And so of course the agent doesn't want to make any calls.
Right. How do you, once the agents are in the system, how are you keeping that system enforced? What's the enforcement way so that they're staying on track? Do you have systems based around that, or is it?
Great question. So I'll share some nuggets here. So if somebody wants access to all that public record data and they want to get it enriched so that they can direct mail them, cold email them, call them, DM them on social media, go to abouttosell.com and you can get all that through your county courthouse. They'll scrape it. They'll enrich. The second thing we use, what you're asking about, is accountability. How do we hold people accountable? And that's I'm so glad you brought this up. So we are using AI to record the actual listing appointment and record actual phone calls and then grade those phone calls and grade those face-to-face appointments. So our agents have a mobile app on their phone and they literally hit record when they walk in, and it creates all these beautiful AI notes for the agent that they can forward to the TC, but it also has all these coaching insights. Like, for example, they got stuck on an objection about commission or the price, or maybe they didn't dive into motivation enough and like ask them enough questions, or maybe they didn't build rapport enough, or maybe they didn't ask for the business. Like there's a really high correlation between the number of times you ask like pre-closing type questions and you actually getting the listing agreement signed. So we use an AI tool. You have to have it connected to your, you need to get it connected to your CRM. So whatever CRM you're using, I don't know, Fall Boss, Sierra, Boom, whatever. There's tons of them, right?
Right.
So the company is RealSync. It's RealSynch.com. And RealSync has all of the tracking around like how many calls your agents make, what their conversion rates are, and all that kind of stuff. The thing you won't find on their website that's like a new thing, my group has been testing for about a year now, which they're literally about to release to the masses. It just got approved on the Apple Store and Android Store a month ago, is the AI sales coach. And so that's what's recording the audio from the in-person listing appointment at the kitchen table. Again, the agent just hits record on their phone and it uploads, and then the AI brain has heard, hundreds and hundreds of listing appointments, and it has recognized patterns that help lead a listing agent to get a listing agreement signed. So like, for example, I had a report come back on one of our listing agents, and it like put in quotation something the agent said, and it was around pricing. The agent said, your property's in a rural area and I couldn't find any comps. I have nothing to show you. And so I'm guessing on value. And well, you and I both know the buyer is going to go to a bank and get a loan, and that appraiser is going to find some damn comps, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't show up to an appointment with no CMA, right? And so, that was like a huge red flag. And so like, if I hadn't had that, I would have no clue that this listing agent took this listing on, way overpriced. I've had other ones where like the agent gets stuck on commissions, and what the AI insights say is that the agent failed to use tie downs. So like, it was like, they basically just talked the whole time.
Right.
They didn't ask the seller things like, hey, Mr. Seller, do you see how this is going to help you get your house sold faster? You see how this will benefit the sale to find the right buyer. Like, it was not an engaging conversation as they were explaining all the things they were going to do to market. And so that was the advice the AI insights gave. I had another one I saw a couple days ago. The agent didn't win the appointment, and it was because they didn't build any trust. They didn't make the person feel like they cared about the real outcome. So it's like, honestly, what we used to do prior to having this AI tool is like, we had to do, physical ride-alongs, and it was massively time consuming. It takes 3-4 hours. But I wrote this book 7-8 years ago, and we've sold, 30, 40,000 copies or something like that. And it's not, like, that hasn't been like wildly successful or anything, but it's a lot of people that are specifically in the industry that have read it. It's like, this is only going to be, it's not going to be read by the general public, right?
Right.
But the people that read it, a lot of them told me they got stuck at around 100 to 150 closings. They couldn't grow their business beyond that. And there's something I didn't write about in the book that you just asked me and isolated. That was one of my biggest ahas. And if I could go back in time and write this book, it's something I would add to the book. And what I found very simplistically is they weren't inspecting what they expected. They never listened to phone calls of the agents. They would do lots of training, like Zoom trainings and in-person training, but they weren't like regularly, like daily, like listening to calls to make sure they were saying the right thing on the phone, doing the actual physical ride-alongs. And it's like, lead conversion dies or thrives at 2 points, either 1 on the phone or 2 face-to-face. And if you're not inspecting that as a team leader, spending money on leads for the agents, how do you expect to hold them accountable and make sure that they remember what you taught them in a, like a classroom type environment?
Yeah, that's brilliant. So your system's full of training. Is there coaching, meaning the mindset, keeping people in the game, moving forward?
I mean, sure. I mean, like our 2-week ramp up for new agents, we have like, we definitely have like 2 hours on mindset and things of that nature. It's like one component of many things we covered during that 2-week time.
So I shouldn't say everybody, so many people aspire to build a team. I don't think many think about $1 billion in size. Who should not try to build a team?
It's a great question. So it's, I picked this up from Keller Williams. It was an acronym with Keller Williams. I'm not with Keller Williams. I actually joined them when I graduated college. I was there for like 4 months. But I have mad respect for KW and Gary Keller, and I loved Gary Keller's book. But they had a class called Recruit Select, and there was an acronym in that class called RSTLM. And I think that acronym, in a nutshell, does a great job describing the job of a team leader. And so RSTLM stands for Recruit, Select, Train, Lead, and Motivate. And so you have to develop those specific skills, and you have to be willing to, if you're not willing to commit to learning the recruiting and selection process or the training process or how to lead people and motivate people, like you're wasting your time. Now, I will say, if you commit to doing those things, like the sky's the limit. You can, you'll sell more homes and do more than you could ever possibly imagine if you commit the time to learning how to do those things.
At what point, that's solid, because a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's just, they could just keep doing their thing. And then, like what happened in your first scenario, you're spending a lot of time with these agents, your production goes down, the company just doesn't grow. So at what point did you see the switch flip from effort, hitting the ceiling in effort, and then feeling the relief once the system kicked in?
I mean, the truth is, like if you make one really good hire, you see the positive impact financially as a team owner within 90 days.
Okay.
Like it happens very quickly. Like if you get someone that's the right person, in our environment, we can't afford to wait 6 to 12 months to see if somebody's going to be successful. So if you put up those barriers in place around selecting the right people, you're going to get agents that produce at an incredibly high level and generate a lot of income for themselves, and also a good return for the business and the team.
Looking back at when you were growing that first team, what were some of the earlier signs that it wasn't going to work that you ignored and just kept pushing through?
And, just constantly trying to educate them, think like, Zoom type stuff on how to work the CRM, what to say on the phone, but they weren't applying any effort. Like I would look at how many calls they made, and the call volume was like negligible. And then, they would go on appointments and they wouldn't win them. And then I would ask them to record them, and they'd record them, and then I'd give feedback, and then they wouldn't implement. There's no learning adaptation. So, one of the key things is again, these are one of the things you find out in those first 90 days is how coachable is somebody? Do they implement what you recommend, or do they go try to recreate the wheel in those first 3 months when they join you?
The system that you currently have and put in place that is replicable, which is incredible, especially with the numbers that you're sharing. What does that look like if someone's watching this and is intrigued about it? What can they expect to learn, and how do they get involved?
If they want to, if they basically want to copy and paste our business, we have a franchise partnership model. We charge a royalty, and then we help them with we go. So instead of working with hundreds or thousands, we go really deep with each individual person. So I have a lead sales trainer, head of operations, head of inside sales, and our whole team at our HQ is working with that partner. So we know their agents, we know what the agents are good at, what they're bad at. We're so much in the weeds with their business. So it's a very intimate relationship, and we don't just do one-off coaching. We're only going to go super deep with people we feel have what it takes to pull off, scaling a big business.
So it sounds like it's way more than a typical franchise where
I wish we didn't even have to call it a franchise, but what I didn't understand, and what was a big aha to me, is that, you go and get, if you want to start a t-shirt company and you want to put the Nike logo on it, that's a licensing deal. If you want to get an operational playbook, that is a franchise deal. And I got so confused because, companies like Remax and others, a lot of the franchise owners, they don't even use the Remax operational playbook.
Right.
And so, which is why Remax probably just got acquired, because it's the operational playbook doesn't work anymore, obviously. But yeah, we're there to help people put the operational playbook and systems in place to get a business to scale super, super fast.
Phenomenal. Tell us about your systems. You mentioned RealSync.
Yeah. So, RealSync is just a data intelligence system. It's tracking everything your agents are doing. It's also got the AI component on it, where it's listening to the calls. It's listening to face-to-face appointments. We've uploaded, and these grading rubrics, basically give a scorecard to the agents so that they know immediately after the appointment what they did good, what they did well, what they did bad. And we've uploaded to the AI brain all of these grading rubrics for meeting buyers, meeting sellers, buy side phone calls, listing side phone calls, all things related to objection handling. And so it's basically completely programmed for the industry. and it knows exactly what to listen for, like objection related things, for example, at the kitchen table for a listing appointment. And it knows it knows exactly what to tell the agent to do to overcome and, improve conversion.
Outstanding. Outstanding. This has been great. For anybody that is thinking about building a team or opening up their own brokerage, you just blew their minds as to how high they can actually set their sights now if they wanted to take the approach that you had or franchise with you. What would you say if there's a producing agent right now that's listening and they're at the crossroads in their business, not sure what their next step is, they're hit their ceiling? What is the one question that they should ask themselves before they made any decisions?
How committed are you to helping other people succeed? Yeah, it's a question I'd ask, because it's, helping other people succeed is not easy and requires a lot of patience. And you have to be okay with the fact that, there's going to be a lot of people that won't necessarily work out. And it's not necessarily because of anything you did. The person is they're just not the right person. So I think that's the key thing to ask yourself is, are you ready to commit to helping other people be successful? And, just a necessity. Like, I wanted to build a real business that would operate without me. When I was an agent, I remember like going on vacation with my wife, and I'm like answering the phone on weekends and evenings on vacation, and it sucked. And I knew I was going to have to, hire people and do all these things, right, to get to a point where I could literally at some, like, for example, today, I'm pretty disconnected from the business. I spend most of my time working on the AI stuff. My sights were always set on getting to having a sellable business one day and getting to a place where I could truly exit the business, have a team in place that run the business for me. So those were always my aspirations, and I was willing to commit to doing whatever it took to make that happen.
Outstanding. Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really enlightening. You mentioned the book. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I have a landing page set up for people. If they want to get the book for free, you can go get it on Amazon. I think it's $10 plus shipping on Amazon. The landing page where it's free, where I send people that I know to get a copy of it for free, is $1,000,000realestateteam.com. You can probably just Google it, but it's a landing page just for the book, and you can order it on there.
That's awesome.
But you can also buy it on Amazon too.
And if they just want to follow you and see what you're up to,
hit me up on Instagram, Christopher Waters. Yeah, Instagram.com/Christopher Waters.
Fantastic. This has been great, Christopher. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Viewers, hit subscribe. Stay tuned for phenomenal guests like Christopher every week. Be your best and have fun.